Hey, you know that selling in normal economic conditions can be challenging enough, but selling during times of economic uncertainty can be sometimes downright crushing, and it requires the right amount of preparation, mindset, and execution. Today, what I want to do is help give you a narrative that you can use to connect with your customers emotionally during your prospecting and discovery motions during times of economic uncertainty. So welcome back to another episode of Sales Lab Live. I'm David Priemer, and dare I say, this might be one of the most valuable Sales Lab Live sessions I've ever done. Now, I'm trying not to turn this into like a major crazy training session. I want to give you some really tangible tips and advice and perspectives that you can use to connect with your customers with authentic conviction and passion and a desire to help them during times of uncertainty. Because we're hearing this a lot from customers in the field. We don't have money. Now's not a good time. Call me back later. We're having to put these recession plans together, like objections and situations that for many sellers, unless you were, around in 2008 and back in 2000 and before, you haven't been through this kind of situation before. And so to kind of frame things up, I wanted to kind of mention a couple things. This is what we're going to talk about today. Now, a lot of this content is predicated on this article that I wrote recently. It was called Your Narrative, Sales Narrative for Times of Uncertainty. So by all means, check this out to kind of get your mind going in the right direction. Today, what I wanted to do was kind of give you some tips and advice in three areas. Number one, when we're trying to sell customers our products and services during times of uncertainty, really important that we prepare, that we go in with the right mindset, and we say the right things. So to kind of kick things off, what I want to do is just give you a sense of what situations our customers might find themselves in at the moment. Because for most of our clients, we kind of find four major states. And it's really important to kind of be mindful of what state your customer's in so you know how you can best service them and how you can adjust your narrative. Now look, as complex as things are out there, there are still clients that are operating business as usual. They have been less affected. They're more insulated from what's going on in the economy, or they're just recognizing, hey, look, this is an opportunity to press ahead, so we're just going to keep staying the course, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are customers that are in total budget lockdown, right? It's like, hey, look, we're not doing anything. We got to stop. Like our CFO said, no more spending, and that's the situation we're in. There are those that are going forward with pre-approved projects, so things that were already budgeted and allotted for are going ahead. And then there's others, and this is, it's actually a bigger category than you might think, where special cases or selected cases are considered. And I'll tell you, like for most of our customers in most selling situations, a lot of customers don't necessarily have budgets set aside for the things that we sell. And so we're always kind of in this situation where we're creating special cases and aligning with people emotionally and from an ROI perspective. So those are the situations your customers might find themselves in. And depending on the situation they might find themselves in, we want to kind of moderate our narrative. So I want to just give you that awareness that there are different categories, and actually what you can use is you can use that narrative I've just given you and these marbles to kind of help showcase to the customer that, hey, look, we work with lots of customers in different situations. What situation do you happen to find yourself in at the moment? If you have the ability to do that level of discovery. Now, the first tip I'm going to give you, and this is almost like the simplest one, is I refer to this as like triaging and prioritizing. And I'll tell you a quick story, and I call this a little section, I call this the dead op strategy. So I was training a client one time, and after the training, one of their sales reps came up to me and said, hey, David, I'm responsible for reinvigorating dead opportunities at our company, in our pipeline. So I'm the dead ops person. And for those of you unfamiliar, of course, customers go through your sales pipeline. Sometimes they don't buy. We list them as a dead opportunity in our CRM. And we have the opportunity to go back to those customers at a certain point in time and say, hey, I know you looked at us in the past, and now might be the right time to look at us. And so this rep asked me, he says, David, what advice do you have for me to reinvigorate these dead opportunities and get them to engage? Because they already said no to us once before, or maybe more than once before. So I kind of took a step back and I looked at the rep and I said, I don't know. Why should they buy from you? Right? And so this question, I want you to think about it. It's like, yes, why should they buy from you? Like, we all believe that our customers should just be buying from us because we have like good products and services. But I want you to really think about, and it's kind of funny to say, but in this economy, why would someone buy from you? Right? Why would they spend their hard-earned money and their corporate budgets when they, when the world is crumbling? Why would they buy from you? Because oftentimes one of the reasons why reps get their asses handed to them when they try to sell customers during times of adversity is because they haven't thought about why the customer would buy from them, right? Now, one thing I want to kind of impress upon you, and I've talked about this before, I actually have a video on my website, on my YouTube channel called Full Spectrum Selling, so you can check it out. And it kind of outlines this principle of, why would a customer buy from us? Well, there's lots of reasons. And I'm using these marbles to represent the reasons a customer might buy from us. And there might be like a main thing. Reason A is the main thing that you usually say. We help save our customers money. We help do this. We help do that. And that's the main thing that you usually say. However, in an uncertain economy, and I would say even just in regular economy in general, there are other reasons why people buy things. And those reasons why people buy things might be actually more important than the main thing that you usually say. And the thing that your customer cares about in terms of the reason why they would buy you in an uncertain economy might actually be different than it would in a certain economy. I always go back to this example of, the pandemic hit, and let's say you were selling PPE to hospitals. Well, they would buy from you. They would buy your masks and gowns and rubber gloves before because, the quality was average. It was fine, but the price was really good, right? But now we're in the pandemic and there's no gloves, there's no masks, there's no toilet paper. Price doesn't make a difference, and all of a sudden quality is super important. So why would you buy from us now? Well, because we have stock and we have the best quality. It's going to keep your physicians and nurses super safe. So the things that your customers care about change, and they will change over time. So I want you to be mindful. This is a little YouTube video. You can find it on my YouTube channel, which is just Cerebral Selling. You can find it on YouTube. The things your customers care about change over time, and so you need to be able to align with what those things are. And to now think about, okay, if I'm going to call a customer now during a time of economic uncertainty, how might our narrative change? Or more importantly, as we kind of pivot from the preparation phase to the mindset phase, the question is, how am I going to deliver the authentic passion and conviction that I need to convert customers during times of, in regular times, but certainly during times of uncertainty? So I'll give you an example. Think about my sales motion. So I sell, training, leadership development training, frontline sales rep execution training. I do keynotes at kickoffs and all that kind of stuff. Okay. So if I'm coming up to a company and a company says, you know what, David, we love the idea of training, but now's not a good time. Our budgets are being cut. We've had to kind of shed maybe some people from our company, and we're just kind of putting the brakes on everything. And if I wanted to, now look, first of all, part of the mindset is actually making it okay for your customer to say no. And if you actually go into the article and you see all the references I provide, one of the things at times like this, you need to be judicious about where you spend your time. So it is okay to give your customers permission to say no and say, you know what, now is not a good time. However, you can prime the conversation with insights about why someone would, despite the turbulence, would want to invest in your product and service now. So for example, if I really felt with high conviction that there was a company that I could help during times of economic uncertainty, they said, now's not a good time, I might say, you know what, that's totally fair. I'll tell you though, a lot of my clients are coming to me now because they realize that part of the challenge is that the economic climate is tough, and we have let some people go. And the people that are still here are a little bit shaken, to be honest. And now we're asking them to go do battle and convert customers in a time where everything is a lot more difficult than it used to be. And they're realizing that if we don't arm these people with the tools and tactics to connect with customers, they're never going to be successful, especially in this environment. So now, in many ways, is the ideal time to invest. And look, I know investing is not for everyone. You see, I'm going into the narrative a little bit here. But you can see how this would actually be helpful. I run a leadership mastermind and leadership training programs. And someone might say, well, okay, it's, we don't have money. Now's not a good time. I'm like, well, look, your team is going through a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of fear and trepidation. They've just seen some of their colleagues let go. You have managers who in many cases are new and have never been through this kind of period of uncertainty before. What are you doing to help people stay on board, to stay engaged, and to give your leaders the tools to keep their people's head in the game and give them the right tactics at these kind of times? Now, look, I'm kind of delivering this in a high conviction, kind of slightly on a scale of 1 to 10 from a heavy-handed message, 7 or 8, like with high conviction. But hopefully you feel what I'm saying is 100% reasonable and legitimate. So my thing to you is, as you prepare and think about what does your customer care about now, I want you to also think about, like, what should they care about now? What is the thing that they might be missing that they should care about? Now, one of the things I will give you is a bit of a narrative, and this is actually quite helpful because this is a third-party narrative, which is, why would someone, now I work with a lot of high-tech, high-growth companies, why would someone invest in technology, hardware, software, this kind of thing, at a time like this? And there was a really great article that came out a little while back from McKinsey, and it's always great to rely on third-party research and studies. This article was entitled Bubbles Pop, Downturns Stop. If you check out the article that I referenced at the beginning of the session, here we go, in the further reading, I have a link to this McKinsey study. And one of the things that McKinsey talked about in this study is they said, look, during times of economic uncertainty, all sorts of things happen, and companies put in place their kind of, contingency plans and kind of robust schedules and things that they do, to make sure that, people are prepared to accelerate and withstand these times of uncertainty. And they call this their robust model. And one of the tenets of the robust model is what they refer to as this sharp digital platform. And they say that organizations that double down and invest in technology during periods of uncertainty actually have a number of benefits. They are able to achieve greater efficiencies than they would by traditional cost-cutting measures. So versus like 2%, if we just cut staff, we save 2% of margin. If we implement some of these digital programs, we can actually achieve 5% or greater incremental benefits. But they also say once the time of uncertainty is done, then you will be in a much better competitive position and be able to, crush your competition coming out of this period of uncertainty. So they say, the companies that do the best are the ones that adopt this strategy. And they kind of go on to say that the people who do this, they kind of paint this picture of like, there's going to be winners and there's going to be laggards. The winners are the ones that, make the changes, that invest, who recognize that, in a downturn economy, now is the time that we actually need to invest, not in everything, but in specific things to build that long-term competitive advantage and win once the uncertainty is over, versus people who just kind of stick their head in the sand, wait for the skies to clear, find it actually much harder to catch up. Now, by the way, I'm not saying that you're one or the other, but third-party research says that this is actually what happens during times of adversity. And by the way, why am I giving this to you? I'm giving this to you so if you happen to be in a position where you're selling technology or you sell something that can help improve the efficiency of a customer's organization without adding people, then this is a great narrative to hang your mental state on and develop conviction. And by the way, even sharing something like this McKinsey article with customers can help generate tons of reciprocity in you because you've shown them, hey, look, this is what the best companies do during times of uncertainty. Because, as much as we think our customers and businesses in general know what to do, no one has a playbook for this. Look at the pandemic. Everyone did something different. Every country, every city, every company, everyone did something different. No one won, okay? I mean, maybe some people won, but everyone did something a little different. So there's no right and wrong here. It doesn't matter if you're a winner, you're a laggard, whatever you do. Just so you know, whatever you decide, there are going to be consequences. And I say here that as you're trying to figure out who to help, this is I would say a seminal piece of content that I have. Again, you can check this out. It's called Sell More by Losing Faster. And the idea here is there's a tons of content. By the way, these YouTube videos, I know I'm blocking it, with my big head here. If you check out the article, there'll be links to these YouTube videos. And the idea here is, especially during times of uncertainty and, during normal times, you cannot help everyone. So don't try to help everyone, okay? You want to help people who are into the problem you're looking to solve. If I gave my best pitch and I said, hey, you know what? Now is the time why you actually have to invest and double down in your leaders. And by the way, I'm not feeding you a line of bullshit here. I have lots of clients who've said, hey, you know what? Yes, we are in a period of economic uncertainty. We are entering a period of maybe even greater economic uncertainty, and we realize we have not invested in our leaders the way we need to help them develop that resilience and to help them lead their teams through this period of growth. And so they're investing in leadership training. Whether you think it's times of uncertainty or not, my contracts tell me that people are investing in this stuff. So there's a certain amount of conviction there, but also, hey, look, I know it's not for everyone. And I don't want to spend an excessive amount of time with organizations who are not interested in investing and who have made the decision that, hey, you know what? Our position is we want to be more conservative. We don't want to spend. We don't want to invest. And you know what? that's okay too. Because, as I mentioned in the article and in previous articles that I link there, you need to make sure that you're treating your customers with empathy and respect now. You should not make them feel bad for any position that they take. But you need to, as a high conviction seller, be able to open their eyes to why it might make sense to invest right now. Now, one of the things I would point out is I want to kind of give you this narrative, and we'll get to that. One of the things I would point out is that, when you're entering, I'm going back to my my marbles slide here. When you're talking to customers and you're trying to figure out what state they're in, one of the most important and sometimes overlooked elements of being able to convert customers in this kind of situation is looking at the projects that they might have pre-approved or what those special cases might be that would allow us to proceed. And, we have this problem. I work with a lot of, we'll kind of get back to the slide in a second, a lot of category creators. I've worked at a lot of startups and tech companies that were maybe the first in their space, where customers really weren't searching for a solution like the ones we provided because the solutions didn't exist, in the past. And so when we kind of rode up to these customers and said, oh, you should invest in our thing, one of the things that they would do is they would kind of stare at us cross-eyed and be like, what? We don't even know what this thing is or how it fits. So one of the things that you can do as you're trying to triage your customers and sell to them is do something that I've talked about in a previous Sales Lab Live. If you're watching this on YouTube, I will link the video in the cards, somewhere here above. I think if I do, I've now hit like the wrong the wrong button in the live show. Okay, we're back. I hit the break button by accident. So, it's over here. I think it's going to be over here. You're going to look at the cards, and I want you to check out that article or that video I did a Sales Lab Live on this concept of aligning with people's priorities and not what they feel is important. And what I mean by that is if companies have pre-existing initiatives underway, they have a marketing initiative, they have an employee recognition initiative, whatever it is, the question is not how can we change those priorities and sell our stuff, but rather how can we align what we are selling with the thing that they've already said was important to them. Now, I don't have time to go into this whole big shebang. However, I will link to that other Sales Lab Live. You should absolutely check it out. But for your viewing pleasure here, I have it in article format, which I believe this article actually includes an embedded version of that Sales Lab Live. So you can just go here, and it's all about how to create a sense of urgency in the mind of your customer by focusing on what's a priority for them versus important. So what do I mean by that is, for most of us, we sell things that save companies money or make them money, okay? I'm going to assume that that's part of the business case you're putting together. We save people money or we make them money. However, I have clients all the time who say, yeah, we put together an amazing business case for the customer and they still didn't buy. And the reason they didn't buy is because even though it was important, right, it's going to save them money, it didn't align with the 1, 2, or 3 most important things they had on their agenda. And the example I often give, and I give in the article, if I said, hey, you know what, is your health one of the most important things to you? All of you out there would probably say, yeah, 100% it is. But if I said, okay, does that mean if I followed you around, every week and wrote down what you ate and how you spent your time and how much you exercised, would I see behaviors consistent with what you said is important? Now, we know what the answer to that question is. The answer is no. And it doesn't mean that being healthy isn't important. It just means that you haven't prioritized it in your life. On the flip side, if you've gotten a scary diagnosis that you're going to have a heart attack, if you don't, get in shape or do some things, you might say, well, shoot, now, yes, it's now aligning with that priority. Now, if you see an ad for a gym membership or some kind of, new exercise regimen, or eating regimen, you might say, yes, that is now a priority for me. So I would submit to you, if you're trying to engage your customers, think about what is now a priority for them, not just importance, but a priority for them, and align your sales motion accordingly, right? Find out what's important to them and try to staple your product or service to that thing, okay? It'll help you in a much easier way get into the organization under the scrutiny of the radar that most products and services have to go through to get, budgeted and approved, and you'll be in a much better position. I know I've just totally yada-yada'd that, and that's easier said than done. But that's what you got to do. The purpose, by the way, of these Sales Lab Lives is to kind of, spark some interest and curiosity in having you think about some of the things that you should be doing. Now, the last thing that I will share with you has to do with the narrative. Okay, so what are the components of this narrative? And if you look in the article that I mentioned at the beginning, like how to craft this narrative, I mentioned a number of key ingredients. Now, these are key ingredients that I talk about in my training. I talk about it on my blog. So I've tried to link some of these tactics and some resources in that article so you can get a sense for how to operationalize them. But I want you to keep in mind that, again, as we look at scripts and narratives, each script and narrative, while it might sound very commonsensical, it might sound very human, breaking down the tactics of which that narrative is comprised is super important. And that's what I teach. That's what I'm all about at Cerebral Selling, is the science of selling, the empathy of selling, and understanding when you use a tactic, why it works, why it doesn't, and combining the right ingredients into that narrative to get the outcome that you're looking for. Now, I do have a warning here for you. There's a difference between a narrative and a script. A script is when you call your bank or your telco call center because you have a billing inquiry. They give those call centers, the agents, scripts. Customer says this, you say that, right? It's an A then B. That's why we actually get put off a lot of times by call center agents, because it feels like they're being robotic and just going through the motions. What I'm talking about here, I'm not giving you a script, okay? This is a narrative. And the narrative is kind of like a story. It's like in a mature discussion on selling during times of adversity, what would this narrative, what would this story, what would this conversation, if you were listening to a conversation between a customer and a seller, what would this sound like? It's like a story. That's what a narrative is. So what I'm giving you here is not a script. I'm showing you some of the ingredients that you can use to craft this story and what this story might look like for your customer. Now, I'm going to show this to you. This is a little bit of a worksheet that I do as part of my objection handling training. And I teach a bunch of tactics when I go through my objection handling training. You can kind of see them on the right-hand side there. So as I ask my students and participants and sellers to kind of craft these narratives around certain objections, I ask them as they go along to kind of tick the box on like which tactics from my objection handling playbook they used, because it helps us be mindful. And now, by the way, the narrative that I'm going to show you here will include not just tactics from the objection handling playbook, but my discovery playbook and messaging playbooks as well. Now, again, this is not meant to be like a full, training where I'm giving you like, all right, here's all the theory behind the stuff. If you're interested, let me know. I have tons of content and tons of training programs to help you build this narrative. However, I want to show you what this looks like in kind of a mature sense. Now, this could be used in a discovery context. It can be used in a prospecting context. So when you're talking to your customer, the first thing that you're going to want to do is acknowledge and empathize. So you're going to say, hey, look, I know there's a lot of uncertainty out there in the market these days, and every company I've been talking to is handling it a little different, right? And I'm curious, from your perspective, how are you handling things at your company these days? For example, and now I'm going to kind of bring in these marbles, right? I've seen customers for whom it's business as usual, and others it's total budget lockdown. Others are just doing pre-approved projects, and others are saying, hey, look, you know what? If we can make the case to do something, if it's high enough on the priority and the lines, then, we're good to go. I'm curious, like, what's the climate like at your company, right? And there I might pause and just say, like, I'm acknowledging and empathizing. I'm making it okay for you to say no, and I'm uncovering and trying to discover what I'm dealing with here, right? Now, depending on what they say, if it's business as usual, it might be full steam ahead. Even total budget lockdown is not bad. Total budget lockdown, in my view, is almost like, okay, select cases are still required, or would still be considered. Even pre-approved projects, right? And so what I want to do is get a sense for like what's important to you at your company, what situation I find myself in. And then I want to prime you with, remember how I was saying at the beginning, well, a lot of customers I've been working with these days, yeah, like they're not spending money on anything, but a lot of them are still investing in leadership training. And the reason they're doing that is because yada, yada, yada. And you know the narrative I already went through. So this is a similar narrative that you can use to kind of broach the conversation with customers. And you can say, hey, look, I've been working with obviously hundreds of similar companies. And by the way, part of the trick here is to use what I refer to as we phrasing. So rather than say, well, what I found, because maybe you haven't spoken to hundreds of companies, but at your organization, you might have a large number of reps or even a small number of reps who cover a large number of companies. And you might say, hey, look, we've been working with lots of companies these days in your space, in your geography. And look, it's true. Not everyone is choosing to invest in new products and services. However, we are finding that the ones who do choose to invest are the ones that believe this. Now, I'm a big fan of the word because they believe this. Because is a magical word. which I talk about in my objection handling course, my reason with satisfaction, that's where that box comes from. And they believe is actually a messaging tactic. I talk about this in the power of conviction. Beliefs, leading with beliefs is very powerful, right? So we might say, because they believe in order to achieve greater savings and emerge from the uncertainty in a much better competitive position, this is an investment they need to make. And by the way, this isn't just me saying this. The reason why a lot of these companies are doing this is because there's a lot of research out there. McKinsey, for example, had this study that they did. I'm happy to send you the survey, or I'm happy to send you the study if you want to take a look at it, where they actually said, the companies that emerge ahead are the ones that invested because they believed it would put them in a much better competitive situation moving forward, but also accelerating out of the uncertainty. And as it turns out, when they followed these companies, they turned out to be right? So this is whatever you think. If you're afraid, if you don't feel it's the right time, in a way, I want to be respectful, and whatever you decide is fine. However, this isn't me saying this. This is data. This is science saying that the companies who acted this way in the past, in these situations, did better. And this would be the equivalent of me saying, hey, look, you know what? It's true. A lot of people, are putting down the budgets and they don't want to invest in sales training, but the ones that are doing it now are doing it because they believe it's going to help them get their people in a much better position, not only to sell and convert customers during the pandemic, to lead their teams during the times of uncertainty, but also coming out of it. And they don't want to wait to invest until they've been hurt and people have left the company due to fear and uncertainty to make this investment. But hey, you know what? The reality is we know this approach is not for everyone. And if it's not for you, that's okay too. And by the way, one of the biggest problems that sellers run into when they get into these narratives is leading questions, leading narratives. So for example, if I were to be like a real jerk about this and say, hey, look, so if investing in your leaders and having a great team and an emotionally well-adjusted team and a team that is able and enabled to do battle during times of uncertainty, if that's not important to you and the growth of your business isn't important to you, well, shit. That's fine. It's not for everyone. I sound like an asshole when I say it like that, right? But if I was kind and empathetic and truthful, hey, look, this isn't for everyone. And by the way, I don't want to waste my time selling to someone who does not believe what I believe. Now, however, with the right conviction, the right narrative, someone might say, hey, you know what? We never thought about this idea of investing now. And by the way, this call does not have to be a one-hit crush. You can think about it. Let me send you the McKinsey article, and we can schedule some more time to talk about it. And whatever you decide, by the way, at the end of the day, is fine. So stepping back and saying, hey, look, we know that this approach isn't for everyone is actually quite an important element of the mindset that you have to find yourself in and impart to your customers. And the last kind of little bonus that I would throw on top of this is a concept I refer to as consider the alternative. I talk about this in my book. You'll see here, it's tactic number 5 in my objection handling playbook. And the premise behind consider the alternative is that customers like their ideas better than they like your ideas. So to the extent that you can make it their idea to move forward, right? They're going to be much more committed to the process than you kind of strong-arming them along the way. And so one of the ways that we do that is we take a step back and we say, hey, look, we know this isn't for everyone. One of the things that a lot of customers that I've been talking to, that our team's been talking to, who find themselves in this situation, they've been asking themselves some tough questions. Questions like, okay, what if we don't do this, right? What if we don't do this? What if the value and the timing, isn't there, or we don't believe it's there? Let's fast forward 6 months or a year. Now we're out of this period of economic uncertainty. What would life be like then? And back to, again, this narrative, the customers ask themselves this question, and you can pose this question and step back and let them pontificate on it, or you can give them the answer and say, the reason why people chose to move forward is because when they took a step back and they said, hey, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe now is not the right time. And they thought to themselves, okay, what if we don't do this? What if we just sit in our hands and do what we were doing before? What would life be like in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months? Would we be further ahead? Would we have a more resilient team? Would we fall behind competitively? These are the questions, and again, the ones that choose to invest are obviously the ones that answered those questions in a way that was, yes, it made sense. Now, again, this isn't for everyone. But again, what am I doing here? I'm not telling you why you should invest. It would be the equivalent of me saying, well, and look, maybe it doesn't make sense to invest in sales training right now. And if it doesn't make sense for you, that's okay too. The organizations, again, that we've been working with have kind of taken a step back and asked themselves, okay, like, what if we don't do this? Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we don't have the money. Maybe we shouldn't come up with the money. And they thought about, like, what would the future be like then? And this is a tactic I talk a lot about. You can check out my YouTube channel where I have a whole video on this, Consider the Alternative, and of course my book. But these are the tactics you can use. And by the way, just to kind of flash it up again, this is a narrative. This is not a script. I'm not asking you to read this out. You would never read this out, verbatim to a customer. But what I'm trying to do here is give you the ingredients that you would use to craft this narrative during times of uncertainty. Now, that's all. I do this I'm like Ricky Bobby. I'm like, what should I do with my hands? That's what I have for you today. Now, and again, I know we've gone longer than we usually do on Sales Lab Live, but this is a really important topic, and there's a lot of nuance wrapped up in here. So really important to kind of go back to what I mentioned at the beginning. Get yourself prepared, get yourself in the right mindset, and practice how you're going to execute this motion. This time in human history and whatever uncertainty we find ourselves in is a tremendous, not only learning opportunity, but growth opportunity for us as sellers, as professionals, as entrepreneurs, and our businesses. So lean into it. Take this opportunity to infuse your team with passion and conviction around how you can actually help your customers accelerate and excel from these situations of uncertainty. That's all I got for you today. Thank you for spending some extra time on this episode of Sales Lab Live. I hope you found it valuable, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode.